Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. And before I introduce you to my always outrageous host companion, Stephen Zarwick, I'm just going to lead with the word spoilers. 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 What do you think, Siege? Do you think 4 covers us?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people are really that interested in Sinbad and the Veil of the Mists, but, Beyond the Veil of the Mists, of which there is no return, Electric Boogaloo, whatever it's called. But you're not just talking about that, are you?
No, I'm not just talking about that. Siege, and I'm very excited right now. I am electric. I have a charge in me that I have not felt on this show for a minimum of 2 years. Like, I mean, as much fun as our Spider-Man episode was a couple of episodes ago, This one is very different. This one is the two of us went out and we saw a brand new movie in the theaters the week it released, and I feel alive because of it. Because we're going to get to talk about it in the moment, right? Like, it's such an exciting thing that we haven't been allowed to do for such a long time. I saw Black Widow, but you didn't. You saw Shang-Chi, but I didn't. We both saw Eternals, but somewhat after the fact. And this is the one. This is the first time we get to talk about it. And I'm very excited about it. It's also Brendan Fraser History Month. So we are going to address, as the punny title probably indicates, Sinbad Beyond the Veil of Mists. I mean, Siegen already said it. That being said, here's our compromise. Here's the compromise from the Say Report. And you can either call it a good deal or a bad deal, but here's what we're offering. We understand that not everybody can get out to go see Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness on opening weekend. We get that. We're understanding individuals. Be it the fact that your life is busy, you don't feel safe going back out to the theater, whatever your reasons are.
So
yeah, exactly.
You don't dictate what you do in your free time.
Exactly.
Except, I guess, listen to this, which I guess we get some control over. But even then, I don't know how you're listening to this.
You can always just shut it off, right?
Half of y'all are fast forwarding and listening with no spaces.
Yeah. But however it is you choose to listen to the show, what we're going to do right now is I have our handy dandy timer from our Fantastic Four and Ocean's 13 episode. It's still here in the studio, and I still think I know how it works. So I'm putting 10 minutes on the clock, and as soon as I say go, that's when spoilers for Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness will begin for the show. And then as soon as that 10-minute timer ends, we will stop talking about it, and there will be no other problem with that. So it's going to start, and when I say go, at least 10 minutes after that, probably 10:30 just to be safe, but we're going to stop talking about it immediately. This timer is our Flamingo Timer. So when it goes off, that's going to be it. So I'm going to wait till the 4-minute mark to start it. Siegen, anything to say in the 30 seconds before that happens?
Just, hey, everybody. We saw Doctor Strange. We're going to talk about it. Saw some other stuff, too, this week, which we'll get to after that, I guess. But, yeah. What's 30 seconds?
I don't know. It's fine. We have to focus on Doctor Strange, though, because right now I'm bursting, Siegen. I am bursting with things to talk about. Are we
past the moment?
No, we're not past the moment. I'm going to say go, and that's what's going to happen. Of course, I just said go again, but I guess at this point I'll say the S go, right? That makes sense. I think everybody knows what that means. And it's like a video game where when you want to begin, you press start. 10 minutes on the clock to talk about Doctor Strange. Holy fucking shit! In the 868 universe, green men stop and red men go, just like in Sliders.
It was so hard for me to not in the middle of the movie stop everything to text you and be like, it's Sliders.
It was such an amazing moment for me, and my favorite part. What do you think my favorite part of it all was, Siegen?
John Davies walking by in the background? No. What was your favorite
part?
That
it has been since, 94 is the premiere of Sliders, right? It has been almost 30 years since the premiere of Sliders, and they still don't understand that in a universe where green means stop and red means go, the fucking taillights on a car would be green. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I really feel bad for the people who haven't seen the movie yet, who it's been 3 months. I guess I can go back to listen to those 10 minutes, and this is all they're getting. But you need to understand that Sliders reference right there felt hand-plucked for me. And I know it's not. Siege exists. All of my friends who watch Sliders exist. The fact that almost everybody who ever watched Sliders universally understands that in the premiere episode, they went to a universe where the main difference was green means stop and red means go. Like, it was for all of us.
Yeah, no, it was... Here's the big thing about this movie that I really think should be celebrated in the end is it is so Raimi. It is the Raimiest Raimi.
It is the Raimiest movie ever.
Yeah, in ways in which Spider-Man definitely has the markings of, but you feel like he never quite got to do the things he quote unquote wanted to do. I mean, which is most evident, right, by the time you get to the end. And we'll talk more about that later this month when we have our Spider-Man episode. But this was like Raimi off the leash, allowed to do whatever he wanted in the Marvel universe. And boy, did he do some things.
I now understand what character Sam Raimi prefers to Venom. Right? I have to imagine that he's a pretty big fan of Mr. Fantastic.
I mean, on top of that, he clearly had a love of Wanda and the Scarlet Witch, though I don't necessarily think I am fully on board with everything he did with her in this movie. But I immediately recognize that it is me wanting like them to just do stuff with characters, and I don't get to do that, right?
Until you're Sam Raimi, you don't get to dictate that, Siege, unfortunately.
No, so do I think what he did was unreasonable, out of character, or like not, bad filmmaking in any way? God fucking no. Like, so much in this movie happened, and it was like it felt like inevitability in so many ways and it just like, and it hurt, like it really did. But it hurt in the ways in which I think it was supposed to. It's not an easy watch for like fans out there that are just like casual fans. I'm very curious to hear how people take this movie in that are not necessarily like deep into this shit, like you think about something like Endgame and like everybody had to be there, whether you'd been watching along or not, right? And people were like, oh, I guess I got to get caught up on the Marvel movie so I can watch Endgame now, right? This doesn't feel like this is that kind of movie. This movie is not for the people that are just like, oh, I don't know, I've never watched one before, let me check in. And like, it's funny because we talked about with No Way Home how it felt like they're just completely throwing anything out the window as far as like, if you haven't been paying attention too bad. Like, this movie kind of keeps riding that wave.
Yeah, there's a good part of that. But at the same time, this feels like the anti-No Way Home in so many ways. In terms of like, where No Way Home was this celebration of everything Marvel that started way back in 2002, which is one of the reasons why we're looking at Spider-Man later this month. It is one of those situations where all the stuff that is celebrated, there's some darkness there as well. And because we opened up the box to celebrate all the light, that darkness also got out. And we're going to have to address it.
Yeah, I know, and so that's where I'm like, I've been struggling for a few days because I saw it day one, Thursday afternoon, was in a theater watching it, and I walked out really having enjoyed myself, really liking the movie, but having this feeling in the pit of my stomach that like all was not well, and I couldn't tell if it was because of something in the movie I didn't like, or if it was something that some choices that were made that I just wasn't on board with, blah blah blah, and I've really come to terms with the fact that really it is just the idea that like, look, we want them to explore any and all aspects of the Marvel universe. It's why we've wanted them to get Mr. Fantastic in there. It's why we've wanted the X-Men to be introduced. All of this other stuff that we've wanted. And like you're saying, like, you asked for it, here it is. Like, this movie is like, here it is. It's just like, oh shit. Because man, that entire scene where she takes out the Illuminati, the alternate universe Avengers, is terrifying and gross and uncomfortable and like and upsetting and all of that. But again, all because Raimi wants it to be. All because this movie is like, that is what this movie wants you to understand truly what is at stake. And fuck, does this movie have stakes left and right.
Yeah, it is. That's the centerpiece of this film. That is your fight at the Statue of Liberty from No Way Home. That is your Avengers Assemble. It's your airport fight. And like the airport fight, it doesn't happen at the end of the movie. It happens as your break into 3, which I loved. I loved it as this break into 3 because now we understand how truly deep these stakes actually are. It's not what, like, at the end of it was like, oh, there were stakes this whole time. And I guess I knew about them. But, like, to sit there and ruminate on everything that's going on and why we can't just stop here, why Doctor Strange has to keep going in the face of the Illuminati, like, being obliterated.
Well, in the introduction of the Scarlet Witch as a true villain, and the lip service that has been played to the idea that, like, she could be potentially the most powerful character in the entire Marvel universe, this is one of those rare times where you see it, right? Like man, all of these conversations about like who would win in a fight, right? Like I think we know.
The answer is always the Scarlet Witch, and it kind of sucks. It's sort of like the ultimate trump card in any discussion about superheroes, especially Marvel superheroes, because you can't ignore the fact that she depowered all of the mutants in the comic universe because she was having a bad fucking day. And so one of the things that I will like throw at it, and this is not necessarily a movie, this is a Scarlet Witch problem as well, is just like the ways in which this movie then just kind of has to fall back on some really like lame tropes as far as like she's just moody, like, right? And like which I just mentioned. Sorry.
No. That's exactly what made me think of it. Right? Is just this idea that like that is how this character exists. Those are the flaws, and like they're not deep. They're not right. But this movie does everything it can to give you things to hold on to. The introduction of the Darkhold, the idea that there is other Wandas out there. There's so many little things that this movie does to kind of earn this character in this movie, and I don't know if it's going to work for everybody. You know, there's a lot of people that have been following Wanda and turning and this turn into the Scarlet Witch, and I don't know if they're ready for it to be this. You know, anybody that walked away from WandaVision, I don't know if necessarily this does that. You know, it's the first time we really get to talk about like the way that the Disney shows really are affecting the larger MCU, right? And I don't know if it worked for me. Like, I'm
the idiot who, because I knew you were seeing it on Thursday, so I needed to give myself something to latch onto. So I decided to rewatch WandaVision, and the second time through, all of the parts that were not homage hit so much better because the homage was one of the reasons I was there. They're going to be paying all this lip service to TV that came before. Like, that's what they sold that show on. And I knew there'd be a deeper story, but they really hit the homage out of the park. So when that deeper story got there after episode 4, which I still think is one of the best Marvel television episodes ever, like, I kind of wasn't as invested as I wanted to be. And then rewatching it before this, I'm like, yeah, I can see how this is totally the origin of a hero that we're going to see in Multiverse of Madness. And now I need to watch it again as the origin of a villain?
Yeah.
With that in mind, it's nuts. I don't disagree with you. I don't know if it is taking everything that was built in that show and is actually respecting it. And one of the biggest representative moments of that is the fact that it designates the universe that we've been watching in the MCU as 616. And that is not, like, 616 has always been the comic universe, and the movie universe, MCU, is 1999999. It's like 5 nines.
Yeah.
And that's fine, and that's wonderful, and it's everything. But to then make it 616 and just say, yeah, that's the facts now, like, it felt like Kevin Feige. and that's time.
Yeah.
Right there. And that's what that's going to be. So we're not going to talk anymore about it. I'm sure CJ and I will talk more about it off mic. But once people get the opportunity to see this movie, come back and listen to what we said. I don't know if we said anything necessarily. I mean, there were some huge spoilers in there, let's be honest. Nothing about the end of it, though. So if you're somebody who wasn't able to get to the pause button in those 10 minutes, I think we talked about a lot. There's still plenty that happens in that movie. There's still plenty in that movie, including my favorite cameo. And it's not the one the mohawked moviegoer was celebrated in the theater. It's someone else. And now Sejan gets to think the rest of the show, who could Devin be talking about? Though Sejan knows me, so I'm pretty sure he knows. At this point. But yeah, so we did see Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Those 10 minutes are going to exist as a time capsule within this episode of the Say Report, and I can't wait till we get to talk about it like at some real length, not just the bullet point
and I'm
stuff.
sure throughout the rest of your lives listening to this show, we will make references to shit that happens in that movie because shit happens. But anyway,
I don't mean to be a total jerk, but by the time we get to Spider-Man as our very special episode of May, I think it's going to be a little difficult not to compare it to Multiverse of Madness,
for sure.
Which is not, and again, we'll make sure to say spoilers and all that. But I mean, there used to be this thing where it'd be 2 weeks, and I don't know what it is anymore. That's actually a discussion that I was engaged in online on Friday. Someone said, can we finally talk about Spider-Man No Way Home? Now, Spider-Man No Way Home has been available for home purchase physically for at least 2 weeks at the time that this person is asking that question.
Yeah.
And by all accounts, yes should be the answer, right? It's one of those situations where if you still haven't seen it, you can excuse yourself from the conversation, but it should be pretty fair game in like public spaces.
Right.
Because in the world pre-pandemic, 2 weeks was sort of the expected time frame. Where if you haven't seen them in these 2 weeks, do you really even care?
2 weeks in release in theaters or 2 weeks from release on home?
2 weeks from release in theaters. Yeah. Like, yeah. I'm certainly not saying that it was some utopia where, like, after 2 weeks, if you wanted to avoid spoilers, like, you didn't have a chance to see a movie, you were shit out of luck. Because they would release commercials that were specifically meant to draw people to want to go see it again if they'd already seen it, to remind them.
Yeah, right. But the other thing is that like things like culture in general, like YouTube videos being made about the movie at that point are just going to be everywhere. If you have TikTok or Instagram, then you've probably seen people like doing pose shots and cosplay. Like you were just within the 2 weeks after a movie released, you couldn't hold the rest of the world accountable for something slipping through. No matter how hard you tried, you were eventually going to see something that was new to you, and you couldn't blame anybody for that. Then a pandemic happened, and timing in this got all wibbly wobbly.
Yeah, in fact, at the height of the pandemic, and I think it's still going on, based on, I had to snooze somebody from one of my social media platforms, a friend, like a personal friend, for something that they wrote about the Doctor Strange movie and their experience when they went to see it. And like, sure, to a normal person, it probably didn't mean anything, but me seeing those words, I'm like, well, fuck. Now I know something that's going to happen in this movie. And it's just like, your punishment, you get timed out for 30 days. I don't want to see what's going on in your life because you took a small moment from me. And honestly, it wasn't that big a steal for me what happened, because it just got my mind thinking as to what it was. But then when the moment happened, I'm like, oh, here's the moment that they were talking about. And I'm a little upset that I didn't get to just be in it. Like, it takes me out of the movie.
More than spoilers nowadays, and I think maybe this is where the conversation really kind of stemmed from, and we just use spoilers as just like an umbrella to block ourselves. But at the end of the day, there's also this element of like, I don't want to focus on it yet. Like, I have not seen it, I cannot form my opinions about it, and so spending any time thinking about it is not how I want to spend my time yet, right? And so like, it's also partly that. And I realized, because even after I'd watched the movie on Thursday, this is really my first like public forum admitting that I've done that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, my family knows where I was. I didn't just like disappear for 2.5 hours. But like, this idea being that like, I didn't tell anybody at work when I went in on Friday that I'd seen it yet. I have not gone out of my way to like bring it up on social media in any way, because I'm still living with it. I'm still ruminating on it. I'm still existing with it. And like, our choice of how to consume it and like how long to be in our own bubble with it, like, that is such a unique thing nowadays that when somebody invades that, it sucks, right? So even if it's not a matter of like, I didn't need to know this thing about this movie, it's literally like, I don't want this conversation to exist right now, right? And I mean, like, that's the problem with social media writ large, right? Is that you're kind of inviting all of these people to your conversation, but at some point it kind of became you're forcing this conversation on everybody. And I don't know when that switch happened.
Yeah,
that's that idea that like, you just don't want to think about it right now. You just don't want to talk about it right now, and there it is. It's being forced on you to talk about.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because you knew, like, you had sent to me from the theater, I can't wait to talk about this in 4 days. So you knew that you were going to have 4 days to sit with your time with that film. Yeah. Whereas as soon as I got in the car, I'm like, I need to be ready to talk about this in half an hour. So I fast forwarded through those moments that like that hit in the movie, and then I'm like, all right, these are the ones I want to mention. These are the ones that I definitely want to mention. And to anybody who listened, I'm sorry that I ate up 5 of those 10 minutes with the topic I started with.
But that's
the topic that hit and mattered most to me.
Sam Raimi would be proud.
I think Sam Raimi would be proud. And Sam, if you're listening, thank you so much. Not just for Multiverse of Madness, but for Darkman, specifically Darkman.
There was some Evil Dead going on too. We're not.
We can't talk about it anymore. There's some stuff in the trailer that made me realize, oh, there's going to be some Evil Dead in this movie. I think, right? And that's the thing.
Yeah.
Because also what you're discussing, if we're going to talk about giving yourself that time to think about the movie, you and I specifically, and I don't know if anyone else does this, but I certainly know you and I did it because I watched us do it when we were still at university together. And there would be nights where people would watch trailers like for half an hour. Like I remember watching the Spider-Man trailer like no less than 20 times one night, hanging out in an apartment that we used to hang out at together, and then being like, this is not fun. Why are you guys living in the movie now? Wait until you get to see the movie to live in the movie. You're taking away part of the enjoyment of actually going to see the movie by sitting here and analyzing the trailer so that you have some idea of everything that's going to happen. Really, all you're doing is setting yourself up for failure by doing that, because you're either going to be disappointed that you called the thing that happened in the movie and why didn't they do something else, or you're going to be disappointed that they didn't do the thing you thought was going to happen in the movie. Because like you're not looking at this thing hoping to understand what's going to happen to get excited or anything like that. I don't even know what it is. I don't know how to describe it. But I do remember after seeing Spider-Man 3, the discussion afterwards, and like, well, I thought that meant this. And I'm like, yeah, I know. You said it when we watched the trailer 20 times that night. And then I realized that I'm not going to be at those hangouts anymore where you guys like, it's a trailer party. And it's like, nah, it's not fun.
I'm not going to sit here and act like we don't also do this kind of shit, right? But there's this weird line that people cross where it becomes this idea that they feel like they're owed that thing, right?
Yes.
It is that fandom privilege that we talk about all the time in video games, movies, television, music, where for some reason there is a point where fans will get there, where they will feel like they deserve this, they've earned this, they are owed this, and when the artist doesn't give that to them, they become vitriolic and like and unbearable and all of this shit, and that is the toxic fan base that can arise, right? And that's where that stuff comes from. So I hope in that when you and I do this kind of crap, it's never with the intention of like, this is what needs to happen, but rather this idea of just like, man, like I can only imagine that this could be possibly or this, but when it comes and it's not that, like to not take that personally. And that kind of gets to what I was saying about my initial feelings on this movie, is that some stuff happens that I was like, ooh, I don't know how much I'm on board with this. But I had to admit how much I personally am, right? Versus like everything that the canon speaks to definitely allows for this to happen. Like it totally makes sense. And I think that that's something that's really interesting when you start talking about stuff like Star Wars, when people get really shitty that Leia can like somehow force move herself. And it's like, guys, that's not out of the realm of possibility for what we've learned about the Force up until this point in any fashion.
There was a lost bit of media where we spent half an hour talking about Leia and what her extent of Force control is.
And we said at the time it could be anything. From what we know, it's A, B, or C, but it could be beyond that. And that idea, right? Or the other big one that I like to point to all the time is Force healing, where people are just like, I can't believe that they put this, that she was able to just heal with the Force all of this time. People could just heal with the Force, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, guys, Force healing has been the excuse for things in any Star Wars media for like since the beginning,
since at least Revenge of the Sith. I mean, you could say the beginning because it's definitely been there from the beginning. It's sort of, I mean, the Force is religion in a lot of ways. The Jedis are space priests in weird ways, and them being like, it essentially, the Force can heal you, but only if you're willing to accept the Force to heal you. It's really sort of a XB for I only help those who can help themselves.
yeah. But like that idea that there is somehow limitations in place is nonsense, right? Because the story literally dictates that we do not understand this power to its fullest extent. We only know a mere fraction of its power. And then blah, 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 everything happens and people are like, that shouldn't be allowed. It's like, why? Who says? And why do you get to be the authority on this? Why at one point did you earn the ability to say this is beyond, this is past the line for like you don't get to do that. And so that idea that fandoms can get to that place is, and this is where it starts, right? Is this idea that fans are given an inch and then they want to take it a mile. So they're given this piece of media, whether it's a trailer or a production shot, a behind the scenes photo, something, and then they will sit there and they will pull out every piece of it that they can because it's the only piece that they have right now, and they'll just build an entire narrative in their head about what must be going on. And more often than not, it's wrong because they're missing other parts of the puzzle.
Yeah. There's a fine line between construction and conjecture. And what we do, we watch something and we have conjecture about what we think is going to happen based on what's presented. But when you live in that space and you begin constructing a full narrative from the 30-second teaser you saw, that's when you're setting yourself up from some sort of disappointment. It's what we've talked about since the beginning of the show. It's tempering expectations.
Yeah.
And when you're tempering a narrative instead of your expectations, you're probably going to be disappointed when it all comes tumbling down.
Well, and like how marketing is like the like arch nemesis of any type of context, because like you're given what they want you to, they want you to build a narrative. They want you to assume these things. So they'll show you a character hoping that you'll think, we'll talk about Michael Keaton and Morbius, right? Mm-hmm. Like they'll show you like a guy is going to be there. They'll make a promise that this event is going to happen, this moment is going to happen, but they'll only give you the 30 seconds of it, less than that, even the 10 seconds of it, or 5 seconds even, and like you build all of this stuff around it and you assume, well, I gotta go because they're gonna finally show Gwen Stacy die or something, or we're finally gonna get to meet this character that we haven't met before, or somehow they're gonna bring this character in, and then you go and it's like oh, he's reading a book at one point and he mentions this character. It's like, that's not cool. Like, that doesn't work for me.
Or like Amazing Spider-Man 2, where they show you literally all of the Rhino scenes in the marketing.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you show up and you're like, where the hell is this whole story that I was promised? And you have to remember that you weren't promised that by the filmmakers. The movie in front of you is the movie that you were promised by the filmmakers. What marketing wanted you to believe is something else, right?
Yeah. And it's a hard biscuit to swallow. I don't know why I went with biscuit. Probably because I had a biscuit for breakfast. But yeah, and that's a really good place, I think, to spiral out from this discussion. But it's an interesting place to be in as Multiverse of Madness comes out. And I guess the one thing that I will say, and I don't think this is a huge spoiler, we're recording this on Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day, Mom. Let's send that out. If you weren't able to do something with your mom on Mother's Day, I think I could safely say that Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness enters the hallowed halls of Mother's Day as a Mother's Day movie.
Oh, man.
Yes. So, you said that you did some other stuff this week before we get to the Brendan Fraser of it all, and I promise it's
we
coming.
Can't ignore, while we're on the Marvel train, as Doctor Strange comes out, this was also the last episode of Moon Knight this week.
Yes, it was.
Mm-hmm. So the first series of Moon Knight has ended.
I don't know.
Some wild stuff.
I don't know is where I'm at.
So I really enjoyed it. I don't know much about Moon Knight beyond this show, to be entirely honest. I think we talked about this. My biggest exposure to him before this was like an episode of the Spider-Man show with Drake Bell there. That's now
was it the Christmas episode? Because that's one of my favorite episodes of that series.
They break into Strange's sanctum to steal an artifact. Him and Moon Knight like team up to do so, and like that whole thing happens. If I'm remembering the episode correctly.
Yep. No, I know that one too.
Yeah.
I was hoping it was the Christmas one where Mysterio's daughter is using Mysterio's tech to make herself feel like she has a happy home for Christmas time.
Yep.
Moon Knight like gets involved because she's using high level fucking technology.
Yeah.
Moon Knight Before Christmas is the name of that episode, and that's an excellent one. Not knowing the character, like there was a joke going around when the Moon Knight show started that these are the people who know him from the comics, these are the people who know him don't know him at all, and these are the people who know him from memes. And yeah, like that's a pretty solid explanation of this character. He was an interesting choice to give an MCU show, but I also feel like he's weirdly indicative of the scattershot feeling that I sort of have with the MCU right now. Is that completely off the button?
So I don't think it's scattershot. I think there's a method to the madness. I just don't think it's one that we're privy to. And I think, for instance, I think there was a large push to do a show like Moon Knight because it was able to reach a certain market that most MCU shows don't normally do. There is a lot going on in this show in terms of like Middle Eastern figures and characters, and also, I mean, like Judaism on display, like for the first time. I think he's our first official Jewish superhero on screen, right?
So let us just pause for a moment to say the headline that said Moon Knight is the first superhero who identifies as Jewish. That was a terrible headline. That's not how you do it. That's not how you write about it. You can write about he's the first Jewish superhero. That's fine. But identifies as Jewish.
By the end of it, spoilers for Moon Knight, by the way.
Yeah, big spoilers for Moon Knight.
But by the end of it, we also get an Egyptian hero as well, and then like there's some really interesting stuff going on there, and I think that's purposeful. I think that is part of the decision to do this character and do this particular story, right? And you can take that whatever way you want. You can be disgusted by that fact or enchanted by it. But like the idea that they wanted to do something that encompassed a group of people that they have yet to really touch on in the MCU, I think was a large part of why. So it feels kind of scattershot if you think about it in terms of like where is this story going, how they've done things in the past. You're not going to get there, and you're right. It feels like it's kind of all over the place. But if you think about it in terms of we now have the opportunity to really kind of branch out and correct a lot of wrongs by like touching on people's in this universe that we've kind of forgotten for the last decade and a half, like it makes total sense some of the decisions that they've made, you know, leaning into Loki and some of the weird like sexuality on display and gender stuff that gets discussed in that show, you know, and then talk about race with Falcon and Winter Soldier, right? Like and then this one, you know, the ways in which it touches on a part of the world that like I'm sure we've seen in these movies from time to time, but we sure as hell haven't spent much time here.
It's where Iron Man starts, technically.
Yeah,
is that whole area of the nation. Though Egypt is not specifically the same as the Middle East, it is that same sort of feeling. And I don't know. I guess you're not wrong. You bring up a good point, because up to this point, I didn't know that London and China even existed in the MCU. And we had full movies set in them, and that was excellent. And so if that's what they're doing, if they're trying to flesh out the world with phase 4 of the Marvel stuff, I'm all for it. But by this time, by this many releases in phase 1, we had some idea of where things were going. And I do not feel that way about the phase 4 stuff.
I'm gonna try and not talk about Strange 2 anymore, right? But I think that a lot of shit went up in the air when Sony pulled the shit it did with Spider-Man.
I agree.
And I think that anyone that saw No Way Home and heard us talk about it, how I talked about how it felt like it was a very like final story for that character, because Disney wanted to put its foot down and say, look, we don't need to keep doing Spider-Man if we don't want to. I think there were some things that in Doctor Strange would have been really interesting and might have had in initial plannings involved Peter more than anybody else, that by the time the movie gets made does not anymore. And I think that might be kind of what you're talking about here, too, is that you're right, and they very well could have had an aim that they kind of wanted to be at by now, but I think that they kind of found themselves kind of stuck without a center. And if they recalibrate on Doctor Strange, that's great. Although I will point out that just this morning, Benedict Cumberbatch came out and said that he's going to be stepping away from acting for a while, which doesn't mean he won't come back as Doctor Strange. It just might be another 7 years, which that does not a tentpole make, right? So like you can't depend on that either. But this idea being that I think that they are kind of in the wind a little bit more than they expected to be, but not that they were unprepared for. And I think the benefit that they have is the entirety of the universe for them to now dip into, multiverse to now dip into.
I mean, you talk about finality too, as insane as that is. Multiverse of Madness was supposed to release before No Way Home, so they already had to reshuffle the deck when they find out, oh, we're not playing bridge right now, we're playing war.
Yeah.
That kind of worked. I don't know, metaphorically speaking.
We're not playing bridge anymore, we're playing euchre.
That was better. Sejin did the better one there, and I am big enough to admit when that happens. Yes,
Moon Knight finished up this week, and it had some really awesome visual stuff. Like, there's just some badass visuals in this, and I don't even necessarily mean like the fighting and things like that. Just like Steven's suit versus Mark's is really cool, and like the switching between the two. Khonshu in a fucking badass suit in the final shot of the show.
Yeah,
I liked a lot of that stuff. I don't know, man.
So it's undeniable how well Oscar Isaacs did as an actor in this series. Oscar Isaacs deserves all this praise that he is being heaped upon him for playing the dual roles that he put on display. I'm struggling to say, like, is it just dual roles that he put on in this? Because even like Mark is for a time hiding stuff, and it's a different Mark that we see in the beginning as opposed to the end of this story. Like, Oscar Isaacs deserves all that praise, but as somebody who is the unofficial president of the Before Trilogy fan club, Ethan Hawke and the performance that he delivered was also no slouch.
Oh God, yeah, no, of course, especially because he ends up doing dual roles in this show.
Yeah,
like there's all sorts of weird stuff that is expected of these characters and these actors, and like unexpectedly, we talked early on about Moon Knight, and I think we talked about the idea of the like anti-action moments where like they show you everything but the action, and the ways in which they kind of lean into that in the finale, and like it's so that means that the actors have to be picking up the pace. Like they need to be picking up the slack in those moments, because where normally they wouldn't, not to say that you don't have to act when action is happening, but like when you're depending on a lot of choreography, fight choreography, and then on top of that probably CGI, so it might not even be real people on screen in front of you, like there's not much to do as the actor, right? But then in this case it's like it's all on you, because we're removing all of that, but you still need to give us the impression that stuff happened and mattered, and like and it works like surprisingly well.
Yeah, I mean, there's always about show don't tell, and this film's like, we're gonna tell everything. Like, we're literally not going to show you any of the moments you want to see. And I think that's why the status of Moon Knight right now being up in the air, whether or not there's going to be a sequel, it's going to lead into a movie, or anything like that, is what disappoints me. Because as somebody who knows the character, that final episode was the most Moon Knight felt like Moon Knight.
Yeah, when he finally comes to terms with himself, and then of course the development of like the third personality, and like so there's a ton of stuff that happens that definitely makes me want more. I am curious to see what the up in the airness is as well. Part of the whole thing is with this conversation is that for a few weeks now we have also been kind of living in the post Netflix's downfall world, right?
Yes.
And again, I don't agree with that assessment, but you have to imagine that people at Disney are like shaking in their boots a bit about making any promises.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know though. I don't understand like something like, because even in the post Netflix world, the fact that Peacock's like, we're gonna double how much money we're spending on Peacock, which also the fact that their budget was $1.5 million for the entirety of Peacock, like. That impressed the shit out of me. Can I be an asshole about that? Like,
well, we'd have to focus on where that money was going and what that money actually means, right? But on the other hand, one of the whole points of something like Peacock is, hey, we don't have to worry about licensing because we own this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So they don't have to pay licensing fees, and that's a huge chunk of your budget.
That's mostly
service,
Netflix's right? problem. One of the reasons they operate at a loss is because of all the licensing that they're paying out. Which is why they wanted to start doing all this original stuff. And then they're spending like the number, and I don't know any of the truth to it or anything like that, but I think it's like $30 million per episode of Stranger Things was what was thrown around.
At this point, I would believe, with the contracts that those kids must have on season 4 of this show, I could believe that by the time they get to season 4, they were doing that. Not great. Somebody at Netflix gets to get better at that.
Like, I hear that, and I'm just like, what the? Peacock's running at $1.5 million, and they're doing original programming that is good. Like,
but is their original programming budget considered part of the Peacock budget?
That's a
or
good
is it
question.
part of the NBC budget? Because that's the other thing, is that they get to move a lot of numbers around because they are not just a streaming service. Whereas like Netflix is that's the place
That's
you
all
go.
they are.
You
Yeah.
go to Netflix, or apparently Disney Plus now for a few of their shows. But I still don't know how any of that's really working for them.
Well, I have to imagine that like one of their first Hail Mary pass was, we will sell this to Disney.
Well,
and that'll keep the lights on.
Yeah, and from what I understand about that initial deal, and I don't know much at all, this is all just like reading like Variety and all that sort of shit, but is that the idea being that they're going to get so much residual money as if it was on Netflix for like so many years. And then like they were basically like, Disney's going to pay us a bunch of money up front. Plus we're going to, for like 2 years, get some percentage of their streaming money. So there's an unknown amount as well that's still to come their way, that for a couple of years, at least, they get to consider part of their income. Right. So we'll see how that does. And if Disney, that's the other part of why Disney may not be leaning too much into this, because now that they have the Netflix shows as well, they may be looking at something like Moon Knight meeting Iron Fist, which could like be a really interesting thing for them to do. But if they want to wait until after Netflix kind of is out of the conversation to do that stuff, so that they don't have to worry about any of the squishiness of that, because they don't want to end up in another Sony deal where suddenly Netflix is like, well, you have to re-up this contract to keep using these characters that we had the rights to or whatever. They don't want that, right? So
on that topic, I can't believe that Submariner Namor is actually being discussed as a character that's going to premiere in the new Black Panther film, because he is staunchly owned by Universal. And I know that Universal and Marvel have been a little bit more copacetic regarding like the Hulk, but that same
the
exact
Islands
thing.
Of Adventure, like
Yeah.
they've had to deal with Universal for a long time because of that, because of merchandising as well as character stuff.
Yeah, but it's one of those situations where I don't know how they're willing to jump in while there's still so much in the air regarding the Sony Spider-Man issue. Mm-hmm. It's like, because everybody, all accounts, Submariner's gonna be in the new Black Panther movie, and
didn't Universal do Dudley Do Right?
Yes.
So they've already got some experience stealing from Disney.
Yeah, I don't know, because Namor initially was going to premiere in Multiverse of Madness back when it was pre No Way Home. So I don't know. It's one of those situations where like, what like, Disney right now should be fortifying its base, not like trying to make deals. Every streaming service should be fortifying their base. And honestly, the last thing to say about like Peacock, that $3 million they're now willing to spend, that might just be marketing for the program. When I think about how little money that actually is in the grand scheme of creating things.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that the fact that Firestarter came out this weekend, real move there. No, that's next weekend. The fact that Firestarter comes out next weekend.
But it is premiering both in theaters and on Peacock is what you're getting at, right?
Exactly. I think they want people to know that, because even the marketing itself, I've seen 2 trailers the same day, one that is still exclusively in theaters and one that said in theaters and Peacock. And I'm just like, that's mixed messaging. What are you guys trying to do here? So I don't know. I just don't know. Streaming right now is just one of the crazy things that are happening in the world that we live in.
It's still the Wild West. I think a lot of people got the impression that things were kind of getting in line because more services popped up and more people were starting to do, hey, this is what Netflix does, we'll do it too. So there was a sharing of like styles and all that sort of stuff. And I think that we as like a consumer, like just started to assume like, well, streaming services are the norm now. And the problem is that they're not. They're still in their infancy. I mean, like, TV is what, 60, 70 years old at this point? Like, and there's still weird shit that happens about, like, you know, they keep moving schedules around. They can't figure out what night is comedy night, like that kind of shit. Like, streaming is still only 10, 15 years old at this point. We got to give it some time to figure out what it's going to be.
That's a good point. I don't know why we treated it like a beacon on the hill the way that we did. You know why we treated it as a beacon on the hill and it got kind of fast-tracked to that level and now we're seeing this fallout? Is it became the main source of entertainment in the pandemic.
Yeah,
sure. It became the king. And now we're seeing, now that theaters are back and television is back as forms of entertainment to challenge that throne, we're seeing just how broken streaming is as a ruler.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of worked for me. So talking about Moon Knight, it was very good, but again, I want to know if there's going to be a sequel, because I want more, especially now that a third identity has been revealed. And that's all I was looking for the whole series was...
Well, they kept hinting on it. It's not like it came out of nowhere. They kept hinting at it, and they kept saying things that didn't quite add up. And there's the beautiful moment with the sarcophagus in the psych ward is still one of the scariest fucking moments on that show. It's still like creepy and works. It's they did really good at introducing that world and only wanting me to see more. So good on them for that.
So hopefully they do something, but we'll see. We will stay on that one. So something we know is not getting another season that I decided to watch this week was Batwoman on the CW.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of talk about the CW Arrowverse at large kind of being on the chopping block with all of the new stuff. We haven't really talked about it, but with like the Discovery WB stuff, or WB Discovery, what are they calling it?
Discovery bought, I don't even know. Like, Discovery is now the owner of HBO, thus the CW. But did Discovery buy Warner Brothers? Like,
No. I think Warner Brothers bought Discovery, and they combined into Warner Brothers Discovery. I think is like the full company name now. Like, I think going forward, that's what it's going to be.
Okay, because it's
clearly we don't know what we're talking about, but this idea, this deal has gone through. And it has put WB in a position to, for good or for ill, depending on how you want to look at this, really sit down and reconsider anything and everything having to do with the DC stuff. All of the things that we've talked about over the last 6-7 years of this show, like this idea that there has kind of been this bad leadership has really kind of leaked down to really produce some really unfortunate circumstances for a lot of the films and television shows and things that were part of this universe. And so I am very much on board with them kind of sitting down and being like, look, we need to go back to the drawing board on all of this. There is so much potential here, and we're letting it slip through our fingers. And in that, there's a lot of things happening definitely in the movie universes. Movies getting canceled left and right, actors getting kicked out left and right because they're just not working for whatever reason. Like they're taking the opportunity to really kind of sift through and some of the riskier gambits that they were working on. So what's really interesting about the Arrowverse side of things is that for a long time it was really kind of the only thing they could depend on. But I do have to say that as somebody that was very invested in that, I am very much of the opinion that has run its course. So, like, as much as I love these shows that exist and like really want to make sure that they get their good solid stories in there, from everything I've heard about Legends of Tomorrow, is they're asking for like one more season to just kind of wrap stuff up and things like that, and they should get it, because this has been a cultural touchstone for a lot of people. It is their only way of consuming DC stories, because the movies are just not doing it for them. And so there's a chance we're going to lose that whole thing in this, and I'm curious to see what happens after that.
So my question about Legends of Tomorrow wanting a new season, is that in the wake of the announcement that it was canceled?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just making sure, because I wanted to make sure that we were all caught up in the fact that not only was Batwoman canceled last Friday, which is what got me to fast forward and make sure I watched through the third season, but so was Legends of Tomorrow.
Yeah, and there's been a Twitter campaign since the announcement to save the Legends, or hashtag save Legends. You'll have to look into it on your own, because I don't do that. I don't get on Twitter enough to make that really. But yeah, there's been some stuff going around since the announcement. I think it was even because they knew before the announcement that it was going to happen, and I think there was even some prior to the announcement moves, but it's only gotten stronger with the actual announcement.
Yeah. All right, cool. I was just curious, because I wanted to make sure that it is known that it wasn't just Batwoman that got the axe. It was also Legends of Tomorrow. Because I was surprised when I read it. Like, I saw that article about Batwoman, and I said, okay, I need to stop right now, and I need to watch that 13-episode third season that I have been putting off until I have all the episodes.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and it was better than the other stuff because it felt Batman. It did like they were hunting Batman villain trophies. And while it seems kind of not Batman style to hold on to trophies of the people that he defeated, it made for some really good episodes of television.
You say that, but traditionally, like, some of the best shots of the Batcave are like giant coins and the dinosaur. Like, he holds on to trophies.
But it's okay. So I guess calling what they were trophies was different to me, because that giant penny is for sure a trophy, but holding on to Dr. Freeze's freeze gun, that's evidence.
I mean, that feels like that's very much out of the Arkham games, where there's always like that holding room in the back of GCPD where they've got all the different memorabilia, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense that he would do it. And the whole fact of it was under lock and key. And then there was an issue in the Batcave and it leaked out into the river due to flooding. Like, it was pretty contrived. But then to call them trophies, it's like, I understand what you guys are trying to do by calling them the Bat trophies, but it's not like the big penny. The big penny is a trophy because that just reminds us what science can do. Like, and nobody's gonna get hurt by that big penny, right? Unless you're sleeping under it. Maybe you could get copper poisoning. Is copper poisoning a thing? I don't think so.
Pretty sure the big penny gets used a lot to crush people that make it into the Batcave. It's just a very easy thing to.
Batman doesn't kill people. His giant penny does.
His giant penny does, and his robotic dinosaur that he also has set up.
Yeah, so it's one of those situations where it was very different in terms of, oh yeah, I'm holding on to this tooth from Killer Croc that if it gets into your bloodstream, you'll turn into Killer Croc. And it's like, that seems like the kind of thing Batman would destroy.
Yeah, send into the sun.
Yeah.
It's a interesting conversation about the idea of Batman having those kinds of weird tendencies, because it always does seem to show up in some stories just because it benefits them. Like the idea that Killer Croc having a poisonous tooth that turns other people into Croc. I feel like they could have done that episode of Justice League. Like, it was up on the Starship Enterprise there. What's it called?
The Watchtower?
Yeah, the Watchtower. Thank you. But having Batman having a lock and key up on the Watchtower and somebody getting into it or something falling out of it, that kind of stuff would also happen there. But it would be out of character when it did, right? You'd be like, this is a dumb thing for you to do, Batman of all people.
And that's my biggest complaint about season 3. First of all, they finally realized that Mary and Alice are their two best characters and give them a season-long arc of their relationship and friendship that is fantastic. But then there are moments where Batwoman is so out of character. You're Batwoman, you should have seen what was going to happen. Or you're Batwoman, you don't just knock that guy down, you knock him out. Right? While he is down on his back prone, you punch him in the face 4 times. 'Cause you're Batwoman.
Yeah.
You don't give him the opportunity to get up and be a threat again. That was the most frustrating part of season 3 of Batwoman, were all these moments where they acted out of character. And then specifically spoilers for the end of season 3 of Batwoman. The Bat Blimp makes an appearance because fuck you, the Bat Blimp makes an appearance.
Yeah.
And the new Joker, who is Batwoman's secret half brother. It's all fucking crazy. Batwoman made me excited to watch Walker again, because Walker hasn't gotten this fucking crazy yet. So he put a bunch of acid bombs in the Bat Blimp, and his plan was to ignite them over the city so that Batwoman would lose all her credibility and everybody would blame Batwoman for what happened. And at the end of the day, they we can't stop the blimp, we can't disarm the bombs, so we have to just do something with it. Oh, we'll steer it over a somewhat desolate section of Gotham City. And I'm like, Batman would fucking never be like, yeah, okay, some casualties are all right. And that's the end of it. The end of it is oh yeah, so the Bat Blimp exploded and it was over Amusement Mile. So it destroyed the Joker's old hideout, which was a smart thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, Amusement Mile, by all lore in Gotham, is fucking abandoned. That's the whole point of Amusement Mile.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, well, that is definitely a desolate section of Gotham. And then no, like there's also like stuff, and it ends with an abomination, a person like with one of those big arms where you can see the bones, like you can see that you have 2 bones in your forearm.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, the acid mutated them, and they killed the reporter who was reporting on it in a radiation suit. And I'm just like, oh, that's never gonna get resolved. Fuck you, Batwoman.
Introduced the Titan formula, apparently.
It kind of felt like maybe that's the other thing. One of the Bat trophies was 666 vials of fucking venom. And the Bane is very disappointing. Like, that one just got dealt with off screen. The big one was Poison Ivy. And the one thing I will say, they did a really nice thing, is the woman who played Renee Montoya in Gotham.
Yeah.
I can't think of her first name, but her last name is Cartagena. Victoria Cartagena, I believe. Don't quote me on that. She came back to play Renee Montoya in Batwoman.
Nice.
And as wasted as she fucking was in Gotham, she was such an actual character in
awesome.
Batwoman. So it felt really nice to have that come full circle. Maybe Angela Cartagena? I don't know. I feel bad that I don't know the actor's name, but I know her as Renee Montoya. And every time Renee Montoya has shown up in one of these shows, I'm like, are we going to see Question Renee Montoya? And then I remember, no, the New 52 completely erased that from her resume. That she became the Question.
I don't know, man. Montoya shows up in The Batman as well, and I was kind of excited because the way that universe is and the story that we see in that movie, I'd be very excited to see if they do a Montoya Question there.
I would love it. It's all I want is a Montoya Question because it's great. I mean, Montoya in Birds of Prey, played by Rosie Perez, was fantastic.
Yeah, I know.
I loved it. I loved it. Renee Montoya is just one of my favorite characters, and they did a really nice arc with her in Batwoman Season 3. But if you haven't been watching Batwoman up to this point, I can't necessarily say go check it out.
Yeah, it's so the only other wing really to consider is the DC animated stuff, and they're actually in a really good place right now because when they did Justice League Dark Apocalypse War 2 years ago at this point, it actually reset their entire universe. Nice. And so for the last year or so, they've been putting stuff out that's very kind of out of time, out of place, because they haven't had an overarching story to really focus on. The new Constantine movie is going to be the first one that really kind of directly addresses the stuff that happened in Apocalypse War. But even then, it's Constantine out of time and space because he's in the House of Mystery in the in-between. Like, so he's not so there's this really interesting like element to it where like basically they could do whatever they wanted with the DC animated at this point because the world is just completely up for grabs. So like with the reset there, the idea that the Arrowverse is kind of ending left and right as it is, so it kind of feels like maybe their TV stuff is resetting as well. The movies are really the last kind of place to look, and it doesn't look good for some of the continuity that they already had going there because they don't seem that excited about like a Wonder Woman 3, and they're definitely not focusing on Flash anymore.
Nope. And who knows what's going to happen to Amber Heard's character in Aquaman 2.
Right. And then there's Aquaman 2 and everything going on with the Amber Heard stuff, although by all accounts she's only in 10 minutes of it, so they're like ready to like cut her out of it completely if they have to. They might not because of contracts, but even then they can lean on the fact that like she's clearly not like a main part of that story. I don't know. I don't know.
That whole thing, I have just stayed away from it. Like, there's enough things to be bothered by in this world to give myself any attention to that distraction, that particular distraction.
At some point, we're gonna have to focus on it, not on the show, obviously. This is not the place for that kind of shit. But like at some point, as people, we're gonna have to kind of focus on it because we're gonna see people back to work. Right?
Yeah.
So like what happens the first time a Johnny Depp film comes out? I mean, the first time an Amber Heard like movie or something comes out, because make no mistake, they're both going to end up working at some point after this. What level of work it is and where it comes from, I cannot tell you. But neither of them is going to be completely out of the game just because of this.
Yeah. And that's really something. That's really saying something. And that's actually the discussion I'm more interested in. Is I also think that everything that's going on with this could be something that sets off a domino effect of other reveals from Hollywood and maybe the not super healthy relationships that people are having there.
Yeah, and work and personal. Yeah, like all around, like the ways in which the ways in which what's going on right now and what happens next is really going to kind of really, I mean, at the very least, it's going to create a lot of people out here that are not involved in Hollywood that are going to have a very different view on it for a while, you know, and kind of the celebrity culture in general, like, has for the last probably decade or so really kind of started to break left and right. The closer that we've gotten to these celebrities, the more and more our kind of obsessions with them have grown, but proven like why like there's so much that has changed about fandom in the last 15-20 years because of things like social media and streaming and all that stuff, and then the amount of content being thrown at us. Like, I'm very curious what is happening with this trial, not because of the specifics of this trial, but because the way the world reacts to this is going to be a new breaking point in that whole story, a new threshold moment.
Yeah. And that's where I'm excited, and we're already seeing that with the fact that people are.
I wouldn't use excited. I'm curious, but excited seems like a weird feeling to have about it.
I guess I don't know. I'm excited from an anthropological standpoint to see the next phase of humanity, and we're already kind of seeing that in just how enamored we are with this trial. The people who have come to me like to discuss it or to see how I feel in it, and then I'm gonna be like, yeah, I'm not paying that any mind or any attention. It surprises me, the people who are giving it attention.
Yeah,
and that's
it feels very 90s. That's
yeah, it
the
does.
big thing for me is it feels like it would be if this was something happening in 1992. Like I feel like nobody be questioning it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's the OJ trial. Like, that's what so many people are comparing it to the OJ trial. Even like morning radio was talking about, like, I haven't felt this way about court TV since the OJ trial. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's a statement that you decided to make.
Yeah, man. I don't know. It'll be weird once we see how the dust settles.
All right. So I think it's time. Look at that. These two guys understanding it. We've talked a lot about superhero entertainment, both movies and television, and the greater world. It's time to celebrate Brendan Fraser.
Dude, I gotta be honest. I'm very excited to talk about this movie.
Me too. This movie. So what we're discussing today, what we're celebrating Brendan Fraser History Month with today, is an animated film released in 2000 called Sinbad Beyond the Veil of the Mists. Right? Beyond the Veil of the Mists?
Yeah, was it 2000? Why did I think it was 98? For some reason, I was thinking it was a little bit earlier.
They started working on it in 1997, but it wasn't released until 2000. That's what
it must have been what I was looking at then. Okay, right. That makes sense. Yeah, well, so there's a good reason for that, because not only is it an animated movie, but by all accounts, it is the very first completely motion captured film.
Yeah, this is a historic film.
Yeah, it's a real piece of cinema history we brought to you guys. So don't turn your fucking nose up at it just because of the way it looks.
And be disappointed if this is an answer on Jeopardy and somebody is like, I've never seen it. No, I'm kidding. It's all right if you've never seen Citizen Kane. The way that it's entered into the lexicon of people. Sejan, I need to get off of Jeopardy Twitter. I don't know how to extract myself from this particular topic on Twitter, but we need to figure it out. I mean, sorry.
Usually the best way out is to get yourself thrown out. So what's something really offensive you could say in there? Like,
I think that we should drop the whole "what is bullshit."
I don't understand why everybody has to answer in the form of a question. Wouldn't it be easier if they just yelled it out?
Can't they just say the answers? Like, what? Who is this for? It's not the 50s anymore.
I guess Alex Trebek would have looked better with a beard.
I think with everything in this world, you could just mention a Mike Richards.
Yep.
Either or, right? That'll get you in trouble. I don't know. I just need to extract myself from it, and I'm sorry. But yeah, this is a bit of cinema history. So I know that right now, if you've never heard of it, and if you've never heard of it, I'm honestly not surprised that you've never heard of it.
There's levels to discovering this film. First, you've never heard of it. Then, suddenly, you look it up and you wish you'd never heard of it. Then, you watch it because these two bozos told you to, and you still aren't sure what the hell is going on. And then you listen to this, and this is the first time ever that you hear that this is a piece of cinema history.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's pretty much the journey, because it is. The fact that this is the first example of motion capture in a movie ever, a full motion capture film, That's nuts. It's absolutely crazy.
For reference, this came out in 2000. 2004 is when we see Polar Express, which I think for a lot of people is probably their first time really like acknowledging that technology, right? Because it had definitely been used before. Even before this, motion capture had been used. It's what makes this movie special is it's the first time that every individual character in this movie is motion captured. Not by the actors that play their voice. That's like one of the very first things that you learn when you read about it, is that there's body capture, facial capture, which is a whole other set of people, and then there's the actors doing the voices. So this is also a really early kind of beginning to that whole kind of conversation and argument where you get guys like Andy Serkis who come in eventually and be like, this is a form of art, and the people that do this are actors. So we should acknowledge that these people that are doing this capturing are actors, and maybe, hey, give them the chance to actually be on camera from time to time, which even to this day he has not been extremely successful in, but he still tries to get that campaign going. But this movie, like it being its first one, immediately that comes to mind to me is like okay, so they're motion capturing bodies, but they're not motion capturing like the actors, right? To make this, it's not Josh Brolin in ping pong balls being Thanos, right?
Yeah, it's really strange because until I read motion capture in the cast list, I had no idea. Because like they're not given any sort of credit. It's not like the cast is credited as the cast, so you don't think for any second that the stuff that's on display in the film was acted by somebody else. You think it was just drawn, and you think that it was.
The only clue you get is every time a character goes to grab something, their hand never quite closes around it, and it just floats to their mouth as they take a drink, or it floats through the air as they swipe their sword. It's there's like, once you realize it's motion capture, there's definitely some things that you're like, oh, that explains why, like, for some reason her dress doesn't move in this scene, but her legs run like that. Like there's all sorts of weird little bits of the animation that instantly click into place the second that you mention that it's motion capture.
Yeah, there's also like one big sequence that it sucks. It's just a terrible sequence where you're like, I don't know what is happening here, and then you realize, oh, they only had $30 million to make this movie, and they did not have the money to put like an electrical effect right here.
It says something that I don't know what moment you're talking about, because I can think of a few. The big one for me is the spider fight. There is some pretty unfortunate animation in the spider fight, which, like, I want to try and be kind to this movie because it's very easy not to be. And anybody that's looking at a single shot from this movie knows exactly what I'm talking about. But like, there's definitely some moments where you almost feel like it was unfinished in some ways, because like that spider fight scene, he is like slicing at its legs and his sword is clear through, and then like 2 frames later, suddenly the bottom half just disappears of the leg. Like it didn't move in any fashion. It didn't react to his sword going through it. But then suddenly it's just not there. Like the frame just shifts and it's just gone. And you're just like, okay, they didn't even bother animating like legs falling off, right?
Yeah, it's that spider fight. That's not the sequence that I'm talking about. Just to be fair, it is the sequence where the lightning gremlin shows up on the ship at the same time they're being attacked by the Kraken, and their solution is, well, this gremlin is made of lightning and the Kraken's in the water. Let's introduce these two with a steel chain and they'll take care of each other.
Right.
Which is a brilliant thing. But then, like, they get the gremlin with it, and then Brendan Fraser's voice is all, yeah, lightning and water. Let's see how these two things mix. And they're just on screen, and then the Kraken starts to bleed, and I'm like, oh, you know what really would have done this for me? Like, any sort of effect to show that the Kraken is being electrocuted right now.
Finishing work on this would have been great.
And
it feels unfinished. It feels like this was the level of animation that a voice actor normally gets to work over while they're in the booth, knowing full well that animators are like 3 rooms away, like toiling over a computer to make it look better, right? And like, and then the voice actor goes to the theater to see this and is just like, oh, you didn't do any more work than that? I thought there was more work getting done.
Yeah, it's because the question that Dale asked the entire time we were watching this film was, who is this for?
Yeah.
And my answer to that question, thinking about an answer the entire time, was, It's for animation nerds. This movie exists for animation nerds to be like, look at this. This is our first foray into a full stop motion film. Because it's important. Like, as much as this movie is weird to watch, if you don't have this movie, they're not trying to push the boundaries.
Somebody had to make it.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody had to make a movie that was the first one of these movies, right? It had to happen.
Yeah, there had to be a Frankenstein before there's a Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah. It's wild, like, and she's right to ask that question, because then, like, you know, it gets made for $30 million, I think you were saying, right?
Yeah.
That's the full budget on it, and I think $30,000 is what it makes.
Yeah, it makes $30,000, makes 29 and change, but let's round it up.
The other thing to talk about is that while the money for this did come from American buyers, right? Like, it was definitely a product of American technology companies, specifically movie technology companies, trying to push their limits. A lot of the work on this was done and conceptualized in India, I believe, is what I was reading.
It's one of the first full animated things ever released from India.
Right. And so there is also something to the idea that we have to also kind of think about what their market is like and what their films are like. And if you start thinking about this up against some Bollywood films, plus the idea that it is using Sinbad, which is like these traditional folk tales from that
that region.
I was trying to think of the best term to put it, but like, because Sinbad is just one of those, it's like fairy tales. It's like Grimm's fairy tales, right? Like these are stories that there's 1,000 of them. Sinbad always, you know, behaves in very particular ways in them. You know them. Kids grow up with the basics, right? And that idea, and it's part of the reason why there's so many great stop motion, as you mentioned earlier, like versions of Sinbad before this. Sinbad kind of becomes this really easy well for the fantastic, right? I'm even I'm even in a D&D campaign that's based in this shit right now. Like I am straight up
with the treasure seeker and everything.
It's not Sinbad specifically, but it is based in this type of storytelling.
Okay.
Right, and then like this idea that you know we're off on the seas and we're encountering harpies and things like that as we, you know, it's a world much like diving into like fairy tales or even like Tolkien-esque, like what, you know, who wrote the original Book of Trolls and gnomes and things like that. Like there's one of these ideas that it's kind of like the some of these stories that all other stories kind of come from. That's what Sinbad is. So because of that, they're free. So like people love making Sinbad movies because they don't have to pay the rights to anybody.
No domain, baby.
There's nobody to complain really when you make weird changes, because as much as this is a very good Sinbad movie up until the last 20 minutes when it becomes a fucking Star Wars film. What the fuck is everything that happens once they go under the sea? And then like, but you can do that. You can do whatever you want because anything can happen in this world. And then like at the end of the day, like the good guys win and the bad guys lose. It's like it's a very easy like story to sell, right? And so you have this animation house that wants to prove itself. It puts together a bunch of American money to do it, and this is what comes out, and it ends up becoming kind of really important to look at in the future, because like it ends up leading to, I mean, everything that we talked about today with Marvel wouldn't exist if this movie didn't push its boundaries in this way.
Very true. That's all I could think as I'm watching Multiverse of Madness today, is like, that weird Sinbad movie I watched last night. That's the through line, right? That's the fish with legs coming out of the water.
I mean, it's the difference between watching Darkman and watching Doctor Strange.
Yeah,
is you get this technology that has been introduced and refined. I won't say perfected, not yet. It never will be, really, truly, but it has definitely been refined over the last 22 years since this movie came out, right? And it allows us to do some of the things that we now get to cherish on the big screen that we take for granted on the big screen.
That's just movie making. I mean, one of the things that everybody is talking about before the Doctor Strange film is the Avatar 2 trailer.
Oh, yeah.
Right? More people are talking about the Avatar 2 trailer than Doctor Strange, because I think Sejan's right. I think a lot of people are sitting and ruminating with the film before sharing their thoughts about it. But it's pretty easy to talk about Avatar: The Way of Water and how it makes you feel. And Avatar, I mean, 2009, right? So 9 years after Sinbad Beyond the Veil of the Mist comes out, that's motion capture that's so realistic that like everybody's like, movie making has changed forever. You'll never have to have a real actor ever again in a film. Mm-hmm. I remember the guy who said that, and I'm like, well, that's stupid, because nobody's going to pay the money to do what Avatar is doing for every movie.
Yeah, I mean the problem is once it becomes not that expensive to do, it'll always be somewhat expensive though,
Yeah.
and then you also have to realize that at some point people's line of acceptance is going to change, right? Like people are going to be willing to put up with a lot worse shit because like you already look at that where who was the guy that did all the TikToks as Tom Cruise and like got into a bunch of trouble because like everybody thought it was just Tom Cruise's TikTok and he had to like make like a public statement about how he was not actually Tom Cruise, he was just deep faking it.
Yep.
But people just like like you know, so at some point there is this that fear that hey, maybe actors don't need to be involved in their own projects. Like it's kind of coming to, I mean, we had a whole conversation about Harold Ramis showing up in the new Ghostbusters.
Yep.
The guy's been dead for 3 years.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good gross point. I mean, he'd been dead for 5 years, but
5 years.
Yeah, good gross point from Siege in there. Gross point blank. Different gross point featuring a different Ghostbuster. I'm spiraling. Anywho.
It's okay. This movie does. It turns into like 5 different movies as it goes along, not at once.
I mean,
like,
it's a good story. I will say that. Yeah. Like it's very much, I imagine that it's aimed at a kid. It's rated G, even though there are some disturbing moments of like blood and viscera in the film.
Yeah, it's okay though, because the way they're animated is it just looks like somebody's throwing shards of jelly across the room.
Yeah, but it doesn't change the fact that like it happens.
Yeah.
The voice cast on this is top notch. Not even talking about the actual like actors who lend their talent to it, including, you know, Brendan Fraser, the whole reason that we're talking about it.
Leonard Nimoy, Jennifer Hale, yeah.
Yeah, like discounting all of them, the fact that you have Jim Cummings as Calico Jack, that Kevin Michael Richards is Mustafa, R.I.P. Mustafa, like that, and I felt something. I cried when Mustafa sacrificed himself so that Sinbad could live, and I'm like, that says something that the uncanny valley that I am that this movie represents. I can still connect to this character saying, no, I die, you go on. That's the contract we have here. I'm gonna cry again because that moment is so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, like if it was, look, like there is clearly a good movie here, and you can understand why if a script is put in your hand and you're asked, do you want to do the voice work on this? You say yes, right? Yeah. Especially when you're being sold on the idea that they're going to try this technology and it's going to be really cool. And of course, you want to be in on it. And then the product comes out, and you kind of have to just live with what the product is, right?
Yes.
Because, you know, this is not one that gets touted by a lot of these people in this movie. Weird.
You know what, honestly, I think happens, and we have pretty empirical evidence that this is the case, is that they make this movie, they started in 97, they finish it up, and then they realize, oh, we have Brendan Fraser in this film, right? And we got Brendan Fraser in this film initially, probably just because he was available and he was willing to do it. He wasn't the big name star that he was in 2000 when this releases, because The Mummy happens in 1999.
Yeah.
And The Mummy happens in 1999, and they're like, you know what movie's kind of like The Mummy is Sinbad Beyond the Veil of Mists. Yeah. Let's release it as it is, and maybe we can get some money to refine it. And it just doesn't happen. Like
yeah, it's a really interesting thing because we always talk about the idea that a movie seems to only be accepted as a film if it makes money nowadays, right? Like there's no level at which a movie can come out and do a mediocre performance budget, box office wise, where it then gets considered to be anything close to good art, right? Like it's really weird. There's plenty of movies where like critics are like, oh, this is a beautiful movie, and audience members are like, no, this movie kind of sucks, but it still makes bank. Like that happens all the time. And then those conversations about, well, was it art? Because, you know, as many people complained, it still made $300 million. Like that is a conversation that happens. But this movie that like kind of went nowhere, doesn't do anything for anybody involved, is kind of shameful in some circles. Like I wouldn't show this to my family on a Sunday afternoon. Like we would have to know what we were getting into and why we were watching it. You said like it feels like it's for animation nerds. So like if I was in an animation class and they said, hey, we're gonna watch this movie, yeah, like totally, like on board, let's do it. But like just to have some fun watching a movie, this isn't gonna be the one I put on, right? But does that make it a bad movie? To a lot of people, to the majority of people, I would say, yeah, probably. That probably designates it as not a good film. You're right, right?
Yeah. But I'm not sad that I own this movie. I think that there's a time where I will put this on in the background. What this movie does is it inspires me. Yeah. And a film like this, a film that is pushing boundaries and trying something. Also, consider the fact that it's a full motion capture movie on a $30 million budget. And again, we don't know what that $30 million really represents. Right. But like one of the reasons why comedies became so appealing, let's put it in that, in the mid 2000s was because for $20 million, you could almost guarantee to double your investment.
Yeah, you get at least 30 or 40 on the opening weekend just from people being bored, right?
Right, exactly. And that was the thing. They're like, we're willing to spend $20 million on there. And if you want CGI and stuff like that, then we're looking at $60 million minimum. This movie right here is one of the reasons why that discussion is $60 million is pretty much your minimum if you want any sort of computer-generated imagery. Yeah. Because we saw what 30 million will do, and it's not as impressive as we hoped it would be.
Well, and then you look at movies that came before this that were full CGI. They might not have been motion capture, but used CGI, and they hold up a little bit better. You know, things coming out around this time. This is the year of Shrek, and things like that. So, like, there's stuff that holds up. We had just watched Kung Fu Panda last night, by the way, and man, does that movie still gorgeous. Like a little flat in a couple of areas as far as like textures go, but otherwise, man, still beautiful. But yeah, so like you're seeing that some of these movies are holding up and some of them aren't. And what's the difference? Oh, they cost more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but the fact that
saying, it becomes justification.
We are going to do this thing for $30 million.
Yeah.
That is impressive at all that it exists and was released in some sort of finished form. That you have like a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yeah, exactly.
Right, I bet it wasn't like backed by the mob or some nonsense.
I mean, it still might have been. We don't really understand Indian construction and film or anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not wrong. The Bollywood nature of it, there were so many moments where I'm like, holy shit, is there going to be a musical number right now? Right. And I would be completely on board for that. Like, it's weird, the stuff that doesn't happen in this movie, and it feels like the only reason stuff doesn't happen is a lack of funds. Yeah. And as weird as it does become, because it does turn into Star Wars, that is a beautiful comparison.
It was just friggin' like I was watching and I was kind of following along and about what was happening, but I just all of a sudden I looked around and I was just like, they're in outer space now. This is wild, and like everything under the water is just feels like it's just out of a different movie. And I understand why, because they're introducing this whole other civilization that we've never known is there, and it literally is an alien world to them. So like it makes sense. It's just that like for all of the non-lightning effects, right? For all of those moments where you're just like, man, that looks a little undone, that looks a little unfinished, blah blah blah. Things like looking at like the water in this movie, or looking at that area like of the world, as it were, like there's a lot of really wild stuff that they do.
There's a beautiful shot of the ship against the moon where I'm just like, that's gorgeous animation. You can't look at that and not say they did a good job of that. All the water, there's this thought inside of me, and I don't know who I would talk to or how to prove it, where I wonder if they just took actual footage of water, like real water, and then just superimposed their stuff over it.
Yeah, I mean there is something to the idea that they there's this feeling of, I'm trying to, like, full motion video almost in a couple of moments, like where it feels like they've taken like something real and like just laid it in, which is entirely possible because they were trying anything with this movie. Like they really were trying anything with this movie. Like some of the stuff with the water though is like, you look at it and it looks gorgeous, and you wonder, man, is that real? It looks so good. And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, frame change, person's head is in the frame, and it's just like, whoa. Like so for every moment where you're thinking, man, this movie really has something going on, they then do something like that and you're instantly reminded what you're watching again.
Yeah. What this did for me, this scratched a very interesting itch for me. I used to go, when I was a big Oscar guy, I would make sure to go to the animated short film and animated short No, sorry. The short film and the animated short film packages.
Yeah,
whenever
Tessa
they
and
were
I
shown.
go to at the Sundance Festival.
Yeah.
We have to always go to the animation, no matter what. We have to attend that.
And one of the main reasons that I would go to the animation, and I always, because I'd have conversations with people at it, and a lot of it is just like, oh, I like animation. And I'm like, oh, okay, good for you. I'm happy that that's why you're here. But my main reason for going was to see what was being done in animation in terms of experimentation, in terms of like new forms of stop motion, new forms of like, I remember seeing one where in the first minute they did 4 different types of animated like styling. And I'm just like, this is awesome. This is what I want to see. And so to watch this movie, which is 85 minutes long, I think it's like an hour 25. It's one of those situations where I'm just like, it's scratching that itch of getting to see experimental animation. But then the really cool thing about this is I know where this went. I know how this worked out.
Yeah. There was this really wild one that we had seen a few years ago that was using basically like you ever seen like C.H. Greenblatt and the ways in which like Chowder is where there's like a texture in the background and something moves over it, and so the texture is changing, but like it maintains like that change. It's so wild to try and explain, but go and watch a couple of episodes of Chowder and you'll realize what I'm talking about. But somebody had taken that to the next level and was using pictures of like real stuff behind it. So this is going to sound kind of gross, but it made sense in the story. A tiger started to rip the face off of this character, and as it ripped back, there was this like actual muscle texture behind it, and then as the body moved, the texture moved, but because it was like this actual like real human muscle behind it, it was extremely upsetting, like in a way. And this is like, and it is animation, like it is this animated technique of this basically like animation cell over an image, and it was unnerving and upsetting, but could not help but think that entire time of like, oh, this is just like Chowder.
Yeah. One of the big ones to me was they used crinkled like gel paper, like the gels that you get like for lighting. They crinkled that to represent water being like poured. And it was just like this, such an interesting thing to use. Like I would have never even considered it. And it totally got the point across that they were trying to get in the film. Yeah. And then watching this and that question of who is this for? And it's like, well, it's a story, right? At the end of the day, this is a story for children. But who this is for is people who are interested in animation. Because there are just some of the stuff on display, and as much as it sucks that you don't have that like lightning effect in there, or that the fight against the spider, I mean, there was a moment where I'm like, oh, this spider is fake. This is a fake spider when he cuts off the leg and he's like, it's made of wood. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what it's going to be, is that like these people built a spider robot to like keep out outsiders. So then, like, when they get eaten by the manta ray, I'm like, well, is it a real manta ray or is it a goddamn submarine? Because I was sort of hurt on the wood spider that was just a spider made of wood that they burned to death. Yeah, it's really cool. I guess the only question I have about this movie is, were they mushrooms or were they jellyfish?
I got the impression they were jellyfish.
So did I! But everybody called them mushrooms.
Yeah, it was very weird.
But it was, and also, I mean, you have Leonard Nimoy, you have John Rhys-Davies, right, as the king. You have Mark Hamill as the captain of the guard, and that was real fun for me because there was a moment where I thought it was Diedrich Bader, and I'm just like, wow, that I couldn't have been further from the truth. But but like, you talk about actors who have worked together in things, like it was just fun. Like I just had fun with this movie, and it made me realize like I love the Sinbad stories, so like I knew it was going to be there. Brendan Fraser, for whatever this film is, he is acting his ass off to do voice acting.
I think everybody really is. I mean, Jennifer Hale as the princess in this movie is. I mean, she's always.
She's always great,
But like she carries the movie. She is the character.
She is the character in the Sinbad movie. They have that wonderful Sinbad moment of, how do you know I'm the real Sinbad? Because you're the only person who didn't claim to be him. Yeah, they knew what they were doing. It was fun. It's a fun little story, and what I would want to do, like I said, this inspires me, and my inspiration would be to take this script and get it reanimated in modern.
Well, now you know what you would do is you throw it up under one of those challenges and have a bunch of different animators each animate like 10 seconds of it, right?
Yeah. And I would love to see how that would do. We should contact all the people who did the SpongeBob movie, Rehydrated, that Paramount Plus just like torpedoed into the ocean.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, you guys want to do this movie, the Sinbad movie? Because I would love to see how animation has grown and changed in the last 22 years and what people could do with it.
Yeah.
Because it's like the story is pretty good. I cared about the characters.
Here's my thing. Like, it did inspire me to want to watch more Sinbad stories, and there's just better stuff out there that does it. Like in terms of fun movie watching, right? Like, go and watch some of the stop motion ones from way back in the day. Hell, get a hold of the Mystery Science Theater ones that they did over those, because they must have done one for every one of those old ones. But like, when I think of Sinbad, that's what I think of, is the old monster movie style Sinbad stories where he would fight like the giant wooden spider, but it would be a claymation one, right?
Yeah. There's also a Sinbad movie that was released in like '99,
which has Brad Pitt in it.
Yeah.
And it's in that weird DreamWorks time where they wanted to kind of prove that they were doing more than religious movies, they promise.
Yeah. So we did Sinbad, which is kind of religious, but a religion you don't understand.
Yeah, that makes it mystical.
Ooh,
but
that's
yeah,
some mystical shit right there.
It made me just want to watch other Sinbad stuff. So like as much as I enjoy this movie, I feel like everything this movie promises, it unfortunately can't really deliver on, because the technology of the time just wasn't going to allow it. And then beyond that, there are other movies that make the same promise and meet it. So it just feels very lost to time because of that. There's as important as it is historically for what it is, that is not enough, because there's so many other options to watch, Because because that's the thing, is we could be saying all of the same stuff about the ways in which it pushes the technology about other Sinbad movies.
Yeah. And that's an interesting thing right there, is how Sinbad's films have always sort of been used, because of the nature of it being public domain, as this canvas.
Right, yeah. Right. Not just public domain, but then add to that the fact that you can do anything. The magic in these stories is so beyond that anything can happen. And so like it becomes a playground. Because it is free, and because there is this built-in idea that there are no limits, it becomes a playground for filmmakers. And that is part of the reason why I think that is why they choose to do this story. It's a shame that they don't get recognized more, but also it's a shame that they didn't have something to really hook people.
Yeah. That's a good point. Again, I think it only got released because Brendan Fraser's name had new cachet in the wake of The Mummy.
To the point where they bill him twice at the beginning of the movie.
That billing before, and so then that fight that I had with Dale about, I don't think he's billed twice, and I'm like, but he is. It says Brendan Fraser, then it says the title of the movie, and then it says Brendan Fraser again. That's double billing.
What it honestly looked like is that they had taken the title card from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And put it before that, and what they didn't realize is they had also accidentally grabbed the 10 seconds before that his name was there. It really, really felt like somebody had just like at the last second been like, oh, we never put the title on this movie. Grab it from the trailer. And so they did, and they just accidentally grabbed Brendan Fraser as well.
Then there's the fact that the trailer on Amazon, I imagine that you watched this on Amazon. I don't know where else you would get it.
It was also up on YouTube, but no, okay. I did watch it on Amazon because I had some Amazon points.
Nice. See, I'm okay with using that.
Zoinko bucks.
I use my Zoinko bucks to buy Sinbad Beyond the Veil of the Mists. Zoinko bucks. They're real currency in a fictional space. Sorry. The trailer on Amazon is literally just the first minute and a half of the movie.
Yeah.
Which does, I will say this, semi-spoilers for Sinbad Beyond the Veil of the Mists. A film that, again, I don't know if I'd recommend you rush out to see this one, but if you are interested in animation, then definitely worth it. And if you're a Brendan Fraser completionist, it's required.
Well, right. Because he is definitely in this movie. More so than other movies we will talk about this month. He is definitely in this movie.
You're so upset about next week's movie.
We'll get to it, but next week. But there is this other thing. If you see this movie in the wild, if you see a physical copy of this movie, you buy it instantly. Like, just and hold on to it, because part of the other thing about it is that there was no magic for me in this movie because I was able to just Google it, find that it was available in a few different places, and I had literal like gift bucks to Amazon, so I didn't have to pay a dime. So like then I watched it on my computer screen while I was also at work this week, right? Not the best chance this movie was going to get. And I'm not saying this movie would magically instantly become something else if I gave it a better chance. But there is something to that idea that if you find this movie physically in the wild and you buy it, and maybe you don't watch it right away, maybe it's a couple of months down the line, and all of a sudden one night you're drunk and you're just looking for something to put on, and you find that plastic wrapped copy, and you open it, you watch it, that's going to be a story, right? And that's the kind of shit that a good movie can pull off. This movie has the ability to do, I think.
Mm-hmm. What this also represents, in terms of it starting in 1997 and Brendan Fraser signing on for it, is it is perfectly demonstrative of another part of history, which was actors becoming voice actors.
Mm-hmm.
Of Hollywood being like, we can just use regular actors for this, right? Because it's Aladdin in 93. Or 92, sorry. The Aladdin in 92, where they're like, Robin Williams is going to be the genie. And then post that, everybody was the voices. And there was this real fear for a lot of the voice actors who do additional voices in this movie of what is it going to mean for us if it's just actors who are taking our jobs?
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
Yeah. I mean, that being said, I feel like this particular movie like gets to kind of hang its hat on the fact that it gets to come out and be whatever it is. It may not be much, but it's something, only because Brendan Fraser, right? Like you said, like I think part of why this movie ends up finally getting released 3 years later is because of this idea that just, well, I mean, we've got it. He recorded the lines and he's famous now. Maybe we can make a buck, right? And that happens. That is a decision that happens. And like, so there is some element to that where if the project can benefit from that. The problem is going to be abused to the point where we lose our jobs is definitely a fear. And I kind of wanted to celebrate the fact that like the second lead in this movie really is Jennifer Hale. In fact, the first lead in this movie is Jennifer Hale. And like she is a celebrated voice actress of the time. Like, so I thought it was really cool that I was going to see a movie that she was doing so much work in.
Yeah, especially where like when I think of Jennifer Hale now, I think of her playing the grandmother in Sing. And that moment, I'm just like, oh, wow, that's Jennifer Hale's voice. And then watching back, and I'm like, this is cool. Like, this is the most historical of our celebratory films for Brendan Fraser History Month.
Yes.
And I'm sorry if you're a fan of Crash and you want to come at me for it. This one represents some real historical shit in Hollywood.
I mean, yes. I don't know if anybody out there right now in this time is really defending Crash anymore. I don't know.
It won Best Picture, though, and there are some people who are very beholden to that. All right. So I think that's it. Anything else you want to say about Brendan Fraser or Sinbad Beyond the Veil of the Mists?
Like I said, I don't recommend this movie as like a go out and watch. But if you find it some way, if it finds its way to you, don't ignore it. It's an easy one to turn your nose up at from what it looks like. But I am actually very happy that I at least have seen it. Yeah.
Again, don't rush out for it, but it's worth a watch at least one time in your life. And it's out there, it's available. But if you find a sealed copy of it, you probably don't open that up. That might actually be worth something. It'd be worth something to me. I know that for damn sure. But yeah, so it's a special movie. And I don't know. I'm glad that it's a special movie because it was a little bit weird when I'm like, we should do that weird Sinbad movie that Brendan Fraser did. And I'm like, oh, this one? Oh my God. And we both kind of had that moment like, I don't know about this. but yeah. So that's where we're at. Which now brings us to next week and what you should watch in order to be prepared for Brendan Fraser History Month celebrations. Mm-hmm. All right, so this coming Friday, the 13th, while you're looking out for Jason and his mom, there's another thing that's coming out.
was very Johnny Carson, but like the subject matter wasn't. Sorry, I wanted to applaud that moment. Go ahead.
Well, then you should have done hooah, or whatever Ed McMahon used to say. I'm wearing a big blue suit.
Where did I become Al Pacino?
Well, you'd be Ed McMahon if I were, whatever, Johnny Carson. I don't know. My extent of Johnny Carson knowledge is the Time Warner infomercials to buy the Johnny Carson collection on DVD. My father would watch those like they were real television.
Why do I have to buy them? They just keep showing.
They just keep showing it, Devin. Okay, Dad. I'm not getting it for you for Christmas then, if that's what you're going to say. Because usually a person would see this behavior and think, this is a hint. This is something that he wants. Not the case. He just enjoyed it.
Dad would just be mad if you spend money on it. Why?
Why did I watch this for free, you idiot? I've seen the best parts. Thanks, Dad. I love you too. Anywho, there's something that's coming out on Friday the 13th, and it is season 6 of Kids in the Hall.
Yeah, which is fucking wild.
It really is, right? I can't believe that there's going to be new Kids in the Hall in the world, and I'm very excited about it. As much as, like, I've come to terms with the fact that as a human being, I'm not a huge fan of sketch comedy shows. Yeah. I'm a fan of a sketch here or there, but even back then when I would watch Kids in the Hall, like beginning at 2 p.m. in the summer, and it would just be on for 4 hours on Comedy Central, I'd be engaged for that first episode, and then it would literally feel like time had stood still. And I don't know what's happening anymore.
Yeah. It's weird. It's one of those weird. So we're in the time of the resurgence, right? Every old thing is coming back suddenly for maybe just one season, maybe a whole new series, but like, just seems like it's not just remakes and redos. It's literally like, no, we're gonna go back to the actual thing, right? And so it's very easy to like call this just a kind of on trend, right? But I am very excited to see what they do, because like, their sketch comedy is just so unique in that it was not like politically aimed, like hugely politically aimed, you know?
Yeah, it was something special.
Like it wasn't of the time. It was kind of timeless. And I take a big risk in saying that, because I'm not saying that it might necessarily still be funny, because the funny was still something of the time. But as far as like the subject matter and the stuff that they're like pulling punches at and talking about, and like the jokes that they are making, are still pretty fucking on point.
There are a lot of guys named Dave in this world, Siegen. Just a lot of guys named Dave.
Yeah, no, I'm just waiting for everybody to start tweeting me all of the very specific Canadian political shit that they did talk about.
I mean, I know what I would talk about as there was a very not okay joke that everybody quoted at my high school from Kids in the Hall, and I had it on my first MP3 player, what they would do, and it but it has aged very poorly. As much as walking, talking stereotypes can, as a bit of a hint if you're still out there and lost as to what we're talking about. But New Kids in the Hall is happening, and there hasn't been New Kids in the Hall since they released a movie in, I think it was 97 that Brain Candy came out.
I do believe it was 97, yes.
Yeah. In 1997, when they released their film Brain Candy. And I know we're celebrating Brendan Fraser History Month, and Canada is pretty much the only thread that those two things have in common, but we're going to be watching Brain Candy for the show. That's what we're going to be doing.
I'm excited to talk about Brain Candy. I'm not. Any trepidation I have had about the fact that this was the movie we were going to look at solely comes from the fact that we are placing it squarely in the middle. At the top of Mount Brendan Fraser History Month, this is the flag you chose to plant.
Well, then here's the good news, right? You're going to watch Brain Candy. You're going to listen to us talk about Brain Candy. Also, I think we're going to probably check out a couple episodes of the new Kids in the Hall series. I know I am. I can't make any promises for Siegen, but
I'll say I will and then forget to, but sure, yeah.
The downhill skiing for Brendan Fraser History Month 2022, just so you know that, like, the flag is Brain Candy. The first section of it, the slalom section, is going to be Furry Vengeance.
I'm so excited. I'm so happy. Oh my God.
And
As
then,
much as I am not looking forward to next week, I am so looking forward to 2 weeks from now.
and then we're going to finish it up with another animated Brendan Fraser voice acting beautiful special with Escape from Planet Earth.
Yeah.
So that's what you have to look forward to. Brain Candy is there because this has been something that I've been wrestling with for a while, and I'll elaborate more on it as we go forward. But that very first Brendan Fraser History Month quiz that I sent to Siegen, one of my questions talked about just the bevy of uncredited cameos that Brendan Fraser has been a part of.
Yes.
And eventually I knew we were going to have to address them. And it's experimentation year at the Say Report. 6 seasons are for experimentation. I hear we're bringing in a new Siegen because he's going to go to school. And I hope that you're as kind to the new Siegen as you were to the old Siegen. Sorry.
Don't write me off. Don't write me off.
You're the one who wants to go to school, right? Let's hope that Siegen Chalk is not better than you, Siegen Garan.
I like go to sea. I like that as the metaphor now.
Either way, yeah, so we're being experimental. So we're seeing, should we give one of these Brendan Fraser uncredited cameo films a whole episode? Or should we maybe just mash a bunch of them together and get out our handy dandy Flamingo Timer?
Yeah.
So we're going to try out this one this year, and then we'll go from there. But that's it. So Brain Candy is what you want to watch for Brendan Fraser History Month next week. And at this point, Siegen, do you have anything else to add?
No, just, if you want to send to Devin, your unsealed, your still sealed copy of Sinbad, you can find him at Devin D. Decker.
Right. And if you want to send Siegen your opened copies, he's available at Siege versus the World. And at this point, I am going to be passing you off to us doing round 2 of our big quiz of Brendan Fraser with Will, where round 2 is Fill in the Fraser, and I'm very excited for this one. So hopefully you guys enjoy the second part of the quiz. Hopefully you liked the first part of the quiz, and hopefully you enjoyed Sinbad Beyond the Veil of the Mists, as we, the Say Report, go beyond the veil. Have a good night, folks. We'll see you on the other side. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Siegen Sarowick, as we leap into round 2 of the big Brendan Fraser quiz of Brendan Fraser. How you doing, Siege?
I'm gonna take a hard guess here and say we probably owe a couple of you an apology for what we just put you through.
I'm going to apologize to my wallet for buying that movie on Amazon Prime.
Don't remind me. I didn't do it yet, but it's coming.
This is fun. See, this is why I wanted to do it like this. We're talking about stuff that hasn't happened. It's nuts. We're out of space and time. But
if this movie could be a tax write-off for me, that might actually change my opinions on this. I got to figure that out before we watch it, because if I suddenly sound very excited about this movie, you'll know why.
Considering that I just consider everything I consume a tax write-off because of this show, that's basically how I've been doing it forever. But yes,
this is where all of our income comes from. Yeah.
So we have just gone beyond the veil of mists, and now it's quiz time. And if it's quiz time on the Say Report, there's one more person that I need to introduce, and that's our own Quizmaster General Will Fournier. Will?
Oh, hey guys. Thanks for having me over again. It's great to be here. We've gone for a different shape this week, no longer a triangle. But it's awkward because we've had to use a chair as the fourth space to make this square correct. But I thought
this was a rectangle.
I mean, it's not a. I guess we'll say rectangle to be safe in case someone measures the spaces and they're not identical. I get it, but I'm concerned the chair might perform better than both of you in the quiz. So.
Ooh, yeah. I guess remind the people where the scores stand after round 1.
So round 1, which I thought was going to be a nice welcome to Brendan Fraser's life quiz, we are sitting at 1 to Devon and a half to Siegen.
Yeah.
So all to play for. And for anyone who was listening last week and was worried that I couldn't remember quotes, in the week I've had time to look it up. And as we move into round 2, which, as discussed, is a fill in the blanks from Fraser's quotes, it is time to separate the wheat from the chaff, the men from the boys, the awkwardly feminine from the possibly Canadian. That's what I was trying to remember, and here we are, good to go.
I knew I had it. Okay, sorry. All right.
I was thinking about it, and while I knew the quote was there, and I thought possibly feminine was the wording, but then I got worried, as Lord and Savior Brendan is Canadian. He might get upset when he listens to these, and I didn't want to call him that. So,
and you trembled in your boots?
I trembled and I forgot words because of him.
Hey, Sejan.
Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy.
Hey, friend.
Hey, pal.
Let's go to Regina and see what happens. All right, are we going to dive straight in for this?
Yeah, I think we should. I think I guess just a reminder in case you didn't listen to last episode, usually we do like a big quiz episode, but we decided to record them and chunk them all up so that you got more Will for your buck during Brendan Fraser History Month.
And Devin just wanted to stomp me more than once in a year, so there you go.
Dude, would you rather have the stomping happen to you all at once, or would you rather want slow little stomps dished out over 5 days?
Yeah, death by 1,000 cuts. Yeah, let's go.
If it ends 5 to 4.5, then I think we're okay. That's over all the trivias, not just on this one.
What it feels like is Will, for the 6th season of Brendan Fraser History Month, is like, fuck them. I'm making this as hard as possible. He's probably mad I scored 1 point.
I mean, that was, of all of them, that was the one I thought you'd get right. Like, Looney Tunes Back in Action, there aren't many people in there he would potentially be afraid to punch.
I thought that Sejan was going to say Bugs Bunny.
No, see, but I wouldn't think at any point he punches Bugs Bunny. Punching Daffy, though, that I could see.
And Daffy does not do that for a living. That just happens.
That's just coincidence.
That's the joke, right? Yeah, I do it for a living. Anyway, we're not rewriting that movie. It's perfect as it is. Let's do this thing. It is perfect.
Let's do it. Space Jam New Legacy does not exist.
All things can be cool. All right, sorry. Let's do this.
2 things can be correct at the same time.
All right, let's see if we can put that to the test as we fill in the Fraser.
Some phrases. There are... I'll let you know as we go. The first question has 2 blanks, and they are different words.
These are the worst cards in Cards Against Humanity, man. 2 blank cards.
It's okay. There's only a few of those.
Everyone is more than 1.
Nope, some of them are 1.
Oh, look at that. This guy.
We'll get to it. We'll find out as we go down the questions.
Will is a professional, so if you need someone to put together quizzes for you, honestly, seek out Will. He knows what he's doing.
Stop dragging out my pain.
Okay, question 1. As sophisticated as blank gets, the less sophisticated you have to become as an blank. 2 different words.
Wow.
Would you like to repeat the question? Or you're okay?
I don't think so.
I think I'm pretty solid with it.
I think I've got a good guess. Yeah.
All right, question 2. Just 1 word this time. There you go. It did change.
Keeping us on our toes.
All right, question 2. I guess blank serves a purpose to show us there is redemption through chaos.
Ooh.
Yeah, Brendan got deep on this one.
I liked my funny answer, but my real answer is my real answer. So note that I will say a funny answer first.
I mean, yes. I will ask for both when it comes around.
When it comes around.
I'm serious now.
Oh, you're serious now? You're having fun?
Slightly Batman on that one. I'm serious now.
Where is the Riddler?
3.
You got a lot of cats.
I really liked Fast and Furious.
Family. Question 3 has 2 words. All right. I don't believe that blank works. I think we get the things we blank for.
Wow. I like this one. I hope that's right. If not, I think it's going to become my new motto in life.
Every family should have a motto.
Okay, I think I got it. I'm like into this one. I'm gonna be so sad if I don't get a single one right. That won't be fair, but got one right?
I hope so.
All right, well, question 4. This has 2 answers, but they're the same.
Oh, God.
Man, you really did throw a curveball in here. Okay.
Oh, yeah, mixing it up. Most people go, I would wish for blank. But chaos has a place in balancing out the light and the dark in the world. I don't know if I would wish for blank.
That's a solid... Brendan Fraser, also, it turns out, a freaking philosopher.
Oh, yeah, like, I was reading through these and I was like, man, this is a good list of things that Brendan just has views on. So, and he's not afraid to say things that might upset people.
Wait, where were those cheap, those weird books that you could get at Borders back when Borders existed? Where it was like the philosophy of, and then whatever the latest TV show or hot celebrity was, right? Like the philosophy of Sarah Michelle Gellar or something, right? Like, where is that? But for Brendan Fraser, right?
Honestly, I was about to say this is the episode where we decide to form the Church of Brendan Fraser, and we become the largest religion in the world.
Oh no!
You could put it in a tax return, then everything becomes tax deductible.
Look at that! And he fell from grace and then built himself back up
with the help of a change.org site you learned about in the previous episode.
No, not the change.org site. I'm talking about when he broke his back and then he now is Brendan Fraser.
And Rome was risen up not by gods, not by monsters.
Nice.
But
Very
gods
good.
and monsters together, working in harmony.
Crashed into one another.
It really was
Paul-
the tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
And School Ties was there.
And so was Paulie Shaw.
Journeying through the center of the earth. Sons-in-law and in the army now.
Paulie Shaw would definitely be one of the apostles, right?
He would be
yeah,
Judas.
100%.
No, I don't think that he betrayed him. But I'd love to read the Book of Shore because every sentence ends with buddy. It would be the $200 question on Jeopardy. Books of Fraser. I'll have Books of Fraser for $200. Together we come to Nash, buddy. What is the Book of Shore? That's correct.
Dear God.
That was a terrible Aaron Rodgers.
We're not in that universe.
Sorry. I wasn't sure where we were for this section.
I'm so sorry. Siegen's acting all serious.
I am acting serious.
He's really into it. I'm glad that you're into this one. It's intense. Question 5. One word. They had a hard time, blank, me in the loincloth. I mean, where were they going to tape it?
I don't know if this is the exact word he used, but I hope it is.
Where were they going to tape it?
It's a question we've all asked.
How shaved do you think he was for George of the Jungle? As shaved as Adam Sandler clearly was in Airheads?
I mean, they had to paint it green so they could green screen it out just in case, right? And you should be pretty shaved for that.
Yeah.
Now I'm just imagining green genitals. I'm going to have weird dreams tonight.
Yeah, we've covered some topics that you're definitely going to come up in the subconscious.
Middle name is Truck Nuts, gentlemen. James Truck Nuts.
Brendan James Truck Nuts Fraser. Oh, and did your wife take your middle name? Is she now Afton James Truck Nuts Smith?
Great callback. New favorite actress.
I want to know how I'm doing on this quiz.
All right, well, let's do question 6,
go
and
to
then we can
6
roll
then.
into some answers. Question 6. One word.
Ooh.
Well, one blank. You know what I mean. Question
Wait,
6.
the blanks could be more than one word?
Sure.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Only on this question and one previous question.
Okay, all right, okay.
All right, question 6. I mean, it was a mummy movie. It was a good film, independent of its source material, in that it looks like blank on steroids.
I don't...
I don't know, but I'm gonna make an educated guess.
That's not what this is about.
Yeah, it's not that educated. Don't worry.
Oh, good.
Mine is an educator guess.
I don't know what that means, but
You
said
will
it could
when
be
I
more than
say
one
the
word.
answer.
Yeah, it'll be really funny when I get to the punchline.
Yeah, just you guys wait.
All right, I'm good to go.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right,
I would also
let's-
like to know where we stand after this.
Let's roll straight in. So, question 1. As sophisticated as blank gets, the less sophisticated you have to become as an blank. What we got?
The more sophisticated film gets, the less sophisticated you have to get as an actor.
The more sophisticated the script gets, the less sophisticated you have to get as an actor.
And give you both 1 out of a possible 2.
Damn.
The actor was correct.
Was it director?
The first one was technology.
Oh,
Technology.
that's a
As
really good
sophisticated
answer.
technology gets, the less sophisticated you have to become as an actor.
Damn, that is a good thought. That is a good
That's
line.
super true. They made a movie about it called Simone.
Brendan knows these things. He sees all. Question 2. I guess blank serves a purpose to show us there is redemption through chaos.
I said death.
I wrote Crash and then realized that's probably not how he sold the movie that won Best Picture. So I went with Tragedy.
Both nicely linked, but the actual answer was, I guess, darkness serves a purpose to show us there is redemption through chaos.
That's true. Because of the darkness, I believe in a thing called love. Just listen to the rhythm of the heart. I mean, there's a chance we can make it now. We'll be rocking till the sun goes down. I believe in a thing called love.
Devin, you're the only person that likes the darkness. Stop it.
It's so fun, though.
Question 3. 2 words available. I don't believe that blank works. I think we get the things we blank for.
I don't
What we
believe
got?
that. I don't believe that prayer works. I think we get the things we work for.
I don't believe that wishing works. We get the things we work for.
It's a full 2 points to Mr. Devin Decker.
Ah.
1 point to Siegen, I'm afraid. But yes, I don't believe that wishing works. We get the things we work for.
I don't believe that Brendan Fraser believes in a god. So I don't think he would use a term like prayer.
It is God.
Trick question. Lemmy is God.
Question.
Trick question. Fraser is God. Who would win in a wrestling match? Brendan Fraser, because Goldberg does it as a job.
Yeah, that's what he does for a living. Question 4. Most people go, I would wish for blank, but chaos is a place in balancing out the light and dark in the world. I don't know if I would wish for blank. What we saying?
You first this time, Dev.
World peace.
I said answers.
Another point to Devon.
Damn.
World peace is correct. He wouldn't wish for world peace. He didn't say what he would wish for, but he wouldn't wish for world peace.
He wouldn't wish for anything. He would work for it.
That's mainly why it wouldn't work, I guess. Wishing doesn't work.
Okay, wording is going to be very important on this next one.
Okay, yes. Question 5. They had a hard time blank me in the loincloth. Where were they going to tape it?
I said tucking. They had a hard time tucking me into the loincloth.
I wrote miking.
Devin wins again. Miking me in the loincloth.
See?
The correct answer.
He was talking about his dick the whole time.
I mean, he was talking about his dick the whole time. What they ended up doing was developing an extremely small microphone that they ended up putting into his urethra hole, and that's what picked him up.
Let's not throw shade on the size of Brendan's penis.
No.
It didn't need to be extremely small.
No, but it's the element.
That's what a girl looks for, right?
The big problem.
Urethra.
My urethra is so big, I'm gonna shoot so much sperms inside of you. I'm like a reverse Hank Hill. I'm a Hill Hank. I'm not proud of that one. But what I'm saying is, it is George of the Jungle that is directly responsible for most of the spy microphone technology employed by the NSA today.
I feel he had plenty of hair in that movie they could have hidden it in.
Oh, yeah. But you know what the issue is? Where are they going to...
They went with the urethra.
Yeah. They had to put everything all together in one thing. Because what he's also talking about is the pack, right? The pack that the microphone audio is transmitted into and then sent to the sound guy. So
That's also in his urethra?
Yeah, no, it's all in one small element. Wow. That now they can just put into drinks and get your whole conversation.
People out there are spending way too much time thinking about Brendan Fraser's urethra.
There's not enough time in the day to think about Brendan Fraser's urethra.
Well, we're down to my last answer, which I know isn't right, so...
All right, well, let's get into question 6 then. I mean, it was a mummy movie. It was a good film, independent of its source material, in that it looks like blank on steroids.
I said Abbott and Costello.
All right, time to see if my "it's an educator" guess bit pays off. Indiana Jones. He's a professor, guys.
Yeah, I get why you said it. It would have been funny if you were right, but...
Sadly, the answer is Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, what a great fucking quote. I'm not really a tattoo guy. I want to have the option to get buried in a Jewish cemetery, but that quote right there might be something I get tattooed on my body.
Just Lawrence of Arabia on steroids? No, I
mean, it is also an Abbott and Costello movie on steroids, Brandon.
It's also Indiana Jones on steroids, Siegen.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying you're wrong either. I'm saying maybe we're all right.
Maybe Brendan.
I wish that were true, but I didn't do any work to make it happen.
Where we at, folks?
Yeah,
that is the end of round 2. We... Scores in that round, 5 to Devon, 2 to Siegen, bringing our totals up to 6 versus 2.5. All to play for in the next 2 rounds. It could be a huge comeback from Siegen. We don't know.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of this. You, the listener, you get to have content that keeps you coming back each week to see what's going to happen next in this crazy big Brendan Fraser quiz of Brendan Fraser. It's exciting times here at the Say Report. So just to remind you that the movie we're watching next week, Siegen, why don't you tell the people the film that we're watching next week?
No, I don't have to. I'm taking no responsibility for this one. I planned a nice family vacation, and you want to take us to this filth.
I did do it. Next week, what we're watching, I hope we already said it, but again, just in case we didn't, Kids in the Hall Brain Candy is going to be the Brendan Fraser movie that we are watching for week 3 of the 6th year of Brendan Fraser History Month.
Yeah, and just remind yourself of that exact wording at the end of that movie, folks, that it came right out of Devin's mouth.
Yep, I chose it. And also, as a reminder, the 6th season of Kids in the Hall premieres this coming Friday on Amazon Prime. So maybe I'm looking for synergy. Who knows?
Now, what does that have to do with anything that you said?
I don't know, Siegen, but you owned the DVD, and that's all that matters. All right.
The DVD, by the way.
The only DVD.
The one they made.
Yeah, the one. Everything else is on VHS. All right, so until next time, if you would like to share your own personal fill-in-the-blank philosophy, Siegen would love to hear it at Siege versus the World on Twitter.
Yeah, and if you want to join me in wishing Tom Welling a happy birthday today, you can hit up Devin at Devin D. Decker.
Tom Welling, probably my least favorite Superman. I'm so glad that I do not have the same responsibility as with Giancarlo Esposito, because I would phone it in. Cheaper by the dozen, Tom Wellington? Boo. Just
Wellington.
boo.
Tom Wellington.
Tom Wellington. What a dick.
Yum, yum. Oh, man.
Am I the right person? That's Smallville, right?
Tom Welling.
Yes, Tom Welling.
Yeah, and I hold you dear to my heart, Welling.
Okay, I don't.
I enjoyed you in Lucifer.
Did he play Superman in that too?
No, he played Kane.
Oh,
Not
that's
spoilers. So
that's clever.
Lucifer.
All right, so Will, if you'd like to send us home.
Oh, you get to throw to myself again. This is such an honor to keep giving things to myself. If anyone can find any information about anybody called Fraser Brendan, I'd love to hear about it. And you can hit me up at 4809, and then here is some more of me saying apologies to your mother.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.